So this week I'm trying to find my niche for my B2B product. And before I dive in and kind of show you the process that I went through this week, I want to answer the question, what kind of underserved niche? So what kind of are my parameters? The first one is I'm looking for a significant high frequency pain point that ideally can be easily addressed with a simple SaaS solution. That would be nice. But it's important to me that it's definitely significant and high frequency. Secondly, I care a lot about the persona. I would like to be able to easily reach and engage a champion being the person who is going to tell everybody within the company or the relevant people within the company that they should buy my solution. And this champion should be the person experiencing this pain, and they should be either very close to the decision maker or they should be the decision maker. That's important to me. The third one is I'm looking for an industry that is ripe for disruption. So in the back of my head, I'm then thinking about the kind of companies that are usually still working with really complex spreadsheets that keep breaking and data goes missing and everything sucks. Or their alternative is buying a pretty expensive, complex solution that has like a lot of different features and that can tailor to a lot of different industries, but it's actually kind of too big and clunky for the specific pain point that they're trying to solve, right? It's like super powerful, but they don't want something that powerful. I'm thinking Salesforce. And the fourth one is I want them to be willing to pay something. I was thinking maybe 150 euros per user per month would be nice. And I would like the sales cycle to be relatively short, about 3 months. So I'm kind of saying, okay, it doesn't have to be super expensive, but for that I want a shorter sales cycle. So I'm kind of naturally steering into SME land. And the fifth one, I added this later. I would like this niche to have a new excruciating pain, something that happened recently, something that changed, that made this whole thing more pressing. So answering this why now question. So let's dive in what I actually did. I will show you, here is my conversation with ChatGPT. I had this conversation with Claude as well, and also ChatGPT 4.0 and 4.5 with web search on, to kind of compare and pick my favorite one. So here's my first prompt, which basically contains all of these parameters that I just talked you through, with some context, some examples, like what do I mean. I will put all of these prompts on my Notion as well, and I will refer to them in the Substack post that will follow this. It's a bit of a maze, but I'll make everything available. And I put also some examples that I had in mind, right? Like warehousing and logistics, scaffolding and construction, ports and harbors, like all of that kind of stuff. So these are just some examples, so ChatGPT knows where I'm thinking, but I told it to come up with other industries. And then very important, I asked it to please focus on most recent data, 2025, from academic research, market studies, industry reports, and online discussions. I want it to be recent. And then the deliverable is a report summarizing 5 key underserved ICPs with supporting evidence, please, on their pain points, industry gaps, and market potential for disruption. And then I told it to please take its time, don't rush this, and only present me the most interesting ICPs based on recent and relevant research data. And I asked it to check itself. Then it asked me some follow-up questions, which felt very nice to me. I'm like, oh, he's really listening. How nice. So I gave it the answers to the follow-up questions. And then it spat out something that looked at first glance very impressive. It's like, wow, so much text. An A for effort. And it's nicely formatted. It's made me really happy. But then I dove in a bit deeper and I saw, for example, this is the first one, warehouse operations managers, SMB warehousing and inventory. I know this is a good one. I've actually supported a small startup targeting this niche and doing very well. So it's like, okay, good. But then when I look at the sources, it did give me the sources that I asked for. But for example, for the first 2 points, it always mentions the same source. And when I open that source, it's a source from a website. See if I can show you. Oh, no. This one. So it's basically a blog post on the website of a startup or of a company that built a solution to this problem. So it's not quite objective, right? And And that's the source underpinning the first two arguments. For me, that's quite weak. And here also it talks something about compliance, loss and risks. That's one source. Yeah, it's not bad. It feels to me more like the kind of thing you would do if you want to write a pitch for fundraising, but not if you actually want to do deep research. So it's always the same source. Then there's a different source. This one is interesting. Then it does a source, but that's actually about fleet management, which is a different, which was one of the different ICPs, because this was about warehouse operations managers, and now it talks about fleet management. So I think he got confused because the second one it proposed was fleet and logistics managers. So in the end, the suggestions are not bad. It's just, for me, the research or the sources it uses to back these things up are very weak, and it's constantly the same one. So I basically had a bunch of back and forth with ChatGPT on this and telling it, hey, I don't like your sources. I don't think this is very powerful. Look, it gave me a lot of stuff. So I've been pinging back and forth with ChatGPT, telling it, okay, I don't like these sources. Can you add more sources, etc. In the end, I didn't. It gave me more sources. It did a slightly better job, but nothing that really blew my mind. That I was like, okay, now I'm totally convinced. And that's okay, because this is just the desktop research that is the starting point. And of course, I dug deeper into some specific ICPs, learning more about these pain points. But always checking the sources and making sure that there were sources and making sure that these make sense. But for me, so I came up with a couple of ICPs that are kind of interesting, although I'm still very unsure. For example, interesting to me, I liked fleet management of smaller fleets. I liked the warehouse and logistic management. I liked field service management. So there were a couple that were interesting, but I still have a lot of question marks about whether there really is an unserved pain point. What is interesting about these is that it's they usually, like 50 to 90% of these ICPs, according to ChatGPT sources, are still using spreadsheets. And then the other option are these kind of heavy-handed complex tools with way too many features. And there are some startups in the space, but there's no clear winner yet for basically all of these ICPs. So I've been basically debating with ChatGPT about this stuff for hours over the course of a week. So basically constantly going back to it after having thought about it. But nothing really struck me that hard that I was like, okay, this is fantastic. This feels really good. Until I asked a different question, which was this why now question. So basically I asked it, okay, to think back about the original prompt. It's in the same thread actually. But then I said, okay, but now specifically focus on niche ICPs that have a relatively new need come up recently. And I gave it an example. For example, I'm thinking about the fact that a lot of social health and art projects have lost access to funding due to Trump's budget cuts and cut of US aid. Don't focus on this example, but look at other recent changes that might have led to a new urgent need for a niche ICP that we could help with a relatively simple software solution. And that gave me some interesting new ICPs. So this one, these are compliance officers in SMEs affected by the Cyber Resilience Act, sustainability managers in fashion and textile SMEs, also because of an EU recent proposal, so something with a law. This one, PSD3 implementation, also a law. Here also compliance, blah, blah, blah. I personally, already a long time ago in 2019, 2020, I worked for a compliance startup, and we struggled a lot to sell our compliance tool that was about GDPR and CCPA compliance, because we found that a lot of companies say they care about compliance, they want to be compliant, but in the end, it's not the most juicy thing for them to spend their budget on. So in the end, they say they care, but we struggle to sell it. That was just my experience. Maybe there are other compliance tools that are doing very well. I mean, I'm sure there are. We just suffered, so I kind of don't want to do that anymore. So that's why I found this one really interesting. The export managers in beauty and personal care companies. Why now? Because of these new tariffs. So I went back and forth on this quite a bit. I asked ChatGPT to also argue the other case, like why would this not work? What are the weaknesses of this ICP? Is this future-proof, etc.? So I debated quite a lot, but then I also thought about, okay, I asked what product category would that be in? so I can kind of understand where I'm playing. I asked it, it gave me a lot of nice insights. Then I asked it for a small competitive landscape. So I said, okay, give me a table of 10 products in that trade compliant software space. These should be the column headers. Please don't hallucinate. And it gave me this. So kind of digging deeper into this. Definitely not enough information for me to make a sound decision. But helping me understand the thing a bit better. What was quite cool is I asked it to describe an MVP. And it did a pretty nice job. And I asked it for the ICP that I should target with this, and how do I basically find them on LinkedIn, right? Did a pretty nice job there. Blah, blah, blah. Lastly, I also asked it, it said like, it gave me this nice MVP description, give me this sample UI. And this kind of is for me to kind of wrap my head around what could be a solution, right? Not saying I want to go for this at all, but just give me an idea of what could this be. So quite interesting. What I did next, I used this tool called Gummy Search, which I heard about from on Greg Eisenberg's podcast. So Greg Eisenberg does a podcast on startup ideas, and he outlined how he uses Gummy Search. Gummy Search basically looks at Substack and analyzes, not Substack, subreddits, and analyzes threads on Reddit. And what I did was I created a audience. Basically, I can do another one. I can go here, new. I can create an audience, for example, if I want to create one for fleet management. I can basically just look for fleet management and go for this and say, okay, interesting. This one, this one, this one, this one. So let's start with those, and I can create an audience. And now it shows me these themes where I started with, okay, pain and anger has nothing. Let me go to a different audience, because this one was quite nice. Supply chain and international export has a lot of logistics in it as well. I got there in a similar way. So I got these subreddits in there that I found. A lot of supply chain stuff. Then let me see. Here again, the themes. Starting to go by pain and anger. So it gives me all of this. I can look for patterns here. Or I can just browse it. People are very upset. But for example, I found there this one. Ran out of a critical material last week. Should have seen it coming, with 105 upvotes and 43 people talking about it. I can go there. It's here. So this is quite interesting. This is like a big frustration, a big pain point in the logistics industry. This is people just screaming about this problem, right? Very interesting. So this is the kind of stuff that's very interesting for me to go through and kind of understand. So I spent a lot of time kind of cobbling this together. So starting with ChatGPT's ideas for niche ICPs, and then creating those ICPs on Gummy Search to do more analysis and read actual voice of customer quotes about these kind of problems. Now, my next step was, so I picked 2 or 3 ICPs that I find quite interesting. I started with the first one. I started now with the export with the tariffs problem, so the export in beauty and personal care. And I went to LinkedIn and I created a list. So I have LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and I just kind of started looking for people who could be interesting, and basically just send them a quick message, asking them whether they'd be willing to jump on a discovery call with me. And this is kind of my litmus test. I will do this with my top 3 niche ICPs that I find interesting. I will just send for each niche ICP 50 requests, asking them if they'd be willing to jump on a call with me. And also describing very shortly the pain point that I think they're suffering from. And I think that's going to be very interesting for me to see which of these niche ICPs I get the most responses from. I think that's, for me, the biggest test to see whether anything resonates, whether people want to even jump on a call with me to do a discovery call. Because I've worked with a lot of companies where nobody in their audience wanted to even talk to them about a potential problem, which to me always led to me thinking, if you can't even get on the phone with people just to talk about a problem, how on earth do you think you're going to be able to sell any tool to them? So I'm practicing what I've preached. Here we go. I'll definitely keep you updated.